Hey friends, it's Ash. Welcome back to the Be Mighty Mom podcast. Today's episode is different, totally different. If you've noticed, if you've been here for a while, the podcast is entirely renamed, rebranded. If you're brand new, I'm so glad you found us. I want to share the story of why this podcast was rebranded, why God is at the center of it now, and why this is going to be all about faith moving forward, even when it feels impossible. Confession time, I did not fully believe for 3.5 years. Not in the way I thought I should, not in the way I'd been taught. And if you've ever felt your faith crumble while trying to protect your child, learning about disabilities, understanding rare disease, and everything in between, I want you to know you're not alone. Welcome to the Be Mighty Mom podcast. I'm Ash, mom to an autistic child with a rare disease, a faith-led advocate, and proof that you can survive the storm and still stand mighty. This isn't just support. It's a movement for moms raising autistic or medically complex kids who feel unseen, overwhelmed, or even questioning God. Here, we believe in inclusion, we trust the science, and we hold fast to our faith because, yes, all of those things belong together. We rage like Jesus, love like Jesus, and advocate like Jesus. This is the Be Mighty Mom podcast. What I'm about to talk about is actually really hard for me to talk about. I don't talk about it very often because it's not something I like to replay. It's not a time in my life that I enjoy discussing because it is when I started noticing the symptoms that my son was struggling with, and he was only 4 months old. And going back to that time in my mind of where I was and how being a first-time mom, how everything in my life just shifted, right? Like when you become a mom, everything changes. But then when you start seeing your baby have something go on with him and have to see many specialists, it's very challenging. So bear with me. I might cry. I'm not really sure what's going to happen. So I would just understand that I'm just going to tell you the story and we'll go from there. But it's important to understand why this podcast changed, because this was the first crack in my belief. It started when my son was just 4 months old, and he had these like tiny bumps on him. Actually, it kind of started around like 3 months old. I started noticing them, and they were tiny, hard, purplish. And I was concerned. So anybody that I talked to about it that was a mom, they were like, well, baby skin is sensitive, so things pop up all the time. So I just kept an eye on him. I have a medical degree. I'm not a doctor, but I did have background in this. So I was like, okay, but like this is odd, right? So I was like, I'm just going to watch him and make sure they don't grow. And then I'll just wait until we go to his 4-month appointment, right? Well, they grew. So his 4-month appointment, it was January 2022. I went to the doctor's appointment, went to the pediatrician. It was me by myself. He got his shots. I asked the doctor, like, hey, what is this? And she's like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. It just might be some type of birthmark. And I was like, yeah, but like, it's really hard to the touch. They move a little bit, but I'm just really concerned. I just want to make sure that like, I'm not scared about something here. And she goes, okay, whatever. If it would make you feel better, I'll just send you to a dermatologist and they'll tell you it's nothing. Cool. I called the dermatologist to try to schedule something, and the doctor had told me it would be months before we even got in to see dermatology. So I was preparing for that, right? When I called and explained what was going on, they had us come in the next day. The next day. And I was like, okay, like, should I be scared here? Like, what is going on? So the whole car ride downtown, my husband's driving, my baby's in the back seat, and I'm sitting in the front seat just going, God, thank you for making sure my son is okay. Thank you for this just being paranoia. I believe in you. I believe in your control. I believe. I have faith. I believe. I have faith. Over and over and over again in my head, the whole drive. Now I'm already going to cry. I had faith in my bones. Faith in God, faith that if I believed fully, prayed fully, nothing was going to happen to my baby. The dermatologist walked in. She examined him. We were all wearing masks still because it was 2021. Like it was still very much like COVID thing. And it was like masks in the doctor's office. right? So I couldn't really see her facial expression, but I didn't have to because I heard it in her voice. When she saw the bumps and examined his body, her voice changed. It shifted. And she goes, I'm going to go and just have another doctor come in and just take a look. I was like, okay. She leaves the room. I'm holding my baby in my arms. We're looking out the window. My husband, Mike, goes, is he going to need a biopsy? No, he's fine. He's not going to need a biopsy. He's 4 months old. There's nothing wrong, okay? I have faith. There's nothing wrong. Nothing's wrong here. The colleague comes in. She did the exam, right? And her expression also changed, right? And I just asked, I was like, should I be concerned about this? And I was like, what is it? What are we thinking? She's like, well, it's fibrous. So we just want to, take a closer look at it. And I was like, okay. So she goes, I'll go get the other doctor. Okay. So she leaves, the other doctor comes back and she goes, he's going to need a biopsy. Oh, my entire world shifted. I'm sorry. I'm like, everything in that moment shifted for me. I had told myself God wouldn't let anything happen. And this is where the first crack really began. I held my 4-month-old baby, nursing him, looking him in the eyes, while the doctor cut out a piece of his body to see what was going on. And we needed to go to see a different specialist. And we needed to have another biopsy done, which they needed us to come in that day. And then we needed to go to the hospital and get blood work done on my 4-month-old baby. And it was just constant. We were in the hospital like almost every 2 to 3 days getting blood work done to monitor because they weren't sure what was going on. For a moment there, they had us convinced that he had leukemia. And thank the Lord that is not the case. But what followed were months of testing, hospital visits, and then finally at 7 months old, yes, 3 months later, we got a diagnosis for an ultra-rare disease with no treatment or cure. Fewer than 100 documented cases in the entire world, with complications and more diagnoses and a whirlwind of uncertainty. At first I clung to faith, right? Because I was told, well, just look for clinical trials, look for any specialist out there that would know what to do here. And I just kept reaching out to people and trying to find somebody and do something. But then we found another issue and he had to have surgery. And then, okay, now I can focus back on that. But then he had another issue and he had to go into the hospital for a 24-hour test. And then we had to focus on that and we had to see more specialists and everything was just so much. And every time I tried to come back to the ultra rare disease, something else happened. This poor kid has been through so much. And at this point, he's in the story, he's a 1.5 years. And I finally was like, okay, I'm going to look for somebody to help me. And I finally found the person who discovered his ultra rare disease. He discovered it in the 90s and he's like retired basically, but he agreed to the Zoom call with me and talk to me. And he was saying that, yeah, it was probably possible that if he has any other siblings, they're going to have it too. And at that point I was pregnant. So I was like, okay, well, guess we're doing this. Thankfully, his little brother is almost 2 and he has had 0 symptoms, anything related to what Maximus has, my oldest son, who will be 4 as I record this in a couple of weeks. So I just settled into that of understanding that this is his rare disease. There's nothing they can do because what happens is bone, right? They discovered it was bone that was growing in his skin, and any type of injury, any type of inflammation, even a bug bite will cause bone to grow in his skin. So I have to be super careful with him. But I don't want to scare him into not being himself, right? So there's this like strange balance of all this stuff. When all this started happening, I clung to faith, right? But slowly, doubt crept in. I whispered prayers that felt hollow, but I prayed. I believed. Isn't that enough, right? Belief. Every new test, every new setback, every unknown shook me. Hospital mornings starting at 5 a.m. Max was hungry, sleep deprived, scared. And I had to protect him from strangers, judgment, stay calm while my heart raced, and keep him from melting down in a stressful, unfamiliar environment. I wanted to scream, cry, collapse, yet I had to be mighty in a way I never imagined. And that part, that story that I just said about yelling at people in a waiting room, that happened just a few weeks ago when my son had to have an overnight EEG and a brain MRI under anesthesia. I was a crumbly mess, and I was losing faith again. I was losing belief in God. I was actually supposed to start classes to become a member of a church that I have been attending for a year and a half. My husband's a member, my boys are baptized there, but I wasn't a member yet because just life, it's hard, right? I was finally about to start, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do this. It was Wednesday. Friday, I needed to go to the hospital to be with Maximus and be at the hospital for 24 hours, and I didn't know what that was going to look like, right? How could I have faith? How could I join a church? How could I be that committed to something when it felt like every prayer just wasn't heard, right? And then losing contact with family members that I thought would always be there for me. I lost part of my support, and I'm just sitting here going, how? And then the things that were happening in the world, it was just a lot. I'm going to cry again. And then it happened. The moment that changed everything. Not a tiny moment, not a subtle whisper of hope. This was a moment my faith began to return. And this just happened 2 weeks ago. It's crazy. We were in the hospital waiting room, carrying months of doubt, years of doubt even, exhaustion, and so much fear because I didn't know what was about to happen. Max was terrified, sleep deprived, hungry, stressed, and I had just finished shielding him from insensitive strangers, keeping calm while my heart screamed, wondering if I was failing him in every single way. Then a man. Max was called back, and I walked back with him, and I held him in my arms while they placed the mask on him to get him to fall asleep under anesthesia. So he could go in for his MRI. He was so cute. He put the mask on and he goes, "Luke, I am your father." And it was just everybody started laughing because you don't know what you're going to get from a kid, especially Max is also autistic. So we didn't know how it was going to be, but I tried to prepare him as best as I could. And he was a total rock star. I'm so proud of him. But when I had to leave, and when I walked out of the room, I literally had bags with me because we were staying overnight, right? So I needed to have clothes and food because he's particular about what he eats, and toys and games and all these things. So I had all this stuff with me. And I walk out and I sit down, and this man, a complete stranger, looked at me and said something so simple, yet so perfect. He said, "God bless you and your baby." And that alone would have been enough. I thanked him, and I went to reception and I apologized to her for the incident where I was yelling at people to not talk about inappropriate things in a waiting room. I went to them calmly first, I would like to say, but then they literally said they had to hear my child all morning. And I'm like, he's 3, he's scared. You got to be kidding me right now. I try my best, but we always try our best, right? Oof. Sorry. So I apologized to her, and she was like, that was ridiculous, whatever. And then the man goes, "You keep speaking up." And it was because I was in that space of do I keep speaking up, or do I just keep staying silent? Do I keep going on with the podcast? Do I keep posting about things? What do I do here? What do I do here? I need some clarity. He shared more. He had stopped talking to his own mother. How seeing Max gave him the peace that he had been praying for. How life had brought him to a moment he wasn't expecting, yet God had used it to answer prayers. The timing was, I get chills thinking about it because his appointment had been originally for the week before. Ours wasn't scheduled for another month, but somehow we ended up there at the same day, at the same time, exactly when we needed it. Every prayer I had whispered in the dark, every cry for courage, every longing for affirmation, it was all answered in that conversation with that man. God became undeniably present in my life. God, mess. Not with a cure, not with instant answers, but in presence, in affirmation, in connection, and in so much clarity. That weekend, as Max underwent an EEG testing with cords wrapped around his head overnight, I felt God there in that hospital, fully present, not erasing the pain, but walking with us, guiding us, protecting us, and whispering, I am still here. I am listening. I am mighty. And so are you. It took nearly 3.5 years for me to truly believe in God again. Not in a naive, untested faith, but in a faith forged in hospitals, in tears, in relentless advocacy, in prayer whispered in such despair. God revealed to me that He does not shame. He does not stay silent. And Jesus does not stay quiet in the face of suffering. He has shown me so many things. Jesus rages. Jesus advocates. He shows up when we feel unseen. This is why this podcast exists now, to learn how God works in the hard, the dark, chaotic moments, to learn how to pray when words fail, to see how advocacy and faith intersect in the lives of our children. This is real. This is honest. This is safe. That is why this entire podcast, the Be Mighty Mom podcast, it all rests on the shoulders of Jeremiah 20:11. But the Lord is with me like a mighty warrior. So my persecutors will stumble and not triumph over me. Even in disbelief, even in anger, even in despair, God is mighty. He is fighting for your child, for your family, and for you. He is present in every hospital, every hallway, every quiet tear, every tiny moment where courage is needed. I want to pray for you right now. Lord, for the mom who feels like her faith has crumbled, meet her in her doubt. Show her that you are still here. You are still mighty, and that she does not have to carry this weight alone. Surround her with your presence in the small moments, the hospital rooms, the stranger's kindness, and the laughter of her child. Restore her faith gently, one day at a time. In Jesus' name, amen. I gotta tell you, this has been wild to even talk about, because I'm sitting here hearing myself talk about this stuff and I'm like, who is this woman? Wow. Because it has been such a long journey. But friend, I want to thank you for sitting with me in this story today. For nearly 3.5 years, I wrestled with disbelief, and God met me in every single moment. And that is the heartbeat of the Be Mighty Mom podcast. Each week, we'll explore scripture, I'll share real stories, and bring in science to remind you God is here, God is present, God is with you, even when belief feels impossible. If this episode spoke to you, I would love for you to subscribe to our newsletter that I send out every week with some prayer, devotionals, and some other stuff tucked right in. If you would love to subscribe, you can visit BeMightyMom.com/newsletter, and you can sign up to subscribe right there. You don't have to believe perfectly. You don't have to be unshakable. God is mighty enough to carry you, even in the middle of your disbelief. Thanks for being here with me today. Stay mighty, stay strong, and advocate like Jesus.